Customer contact online when every phrase counts. Some of you might think that we are now facing the end of the pandemic and that what some organizations already openly communicated, as soon as the pandemic is over, you're going to hit the road again and meet customers on site again, handshake and do business as you did before. But let's face it, this will not be the reality. Of course, you might say you may or may not like to do online meetings. However, it's not up to you to make the decision. Of course, you as a company can decide that you're going to do on-site meetings again. And let's face it, many of these on-site meetings, or at least some of them, will return and happen as they happened before. However, many will not do so for a very simple reason, because customers now found out that meeting online is a good solution, is an easy solution. It's a flexible solution which doesn't force you to be in a certain location when you have a certain appointment on a certain day. And that is what many organizations prefer. I can also tell you from my point of view, I'm running my business since the beginning of the pandemic from this notebook, from my desk. However, I was with online training at the very early 2000s already due to my first employer back then. However, when we now look into reality and we see organizations simply claiming that they say it will happen again that we meet on site, we simply can look into official data, and that tells you that you will not work as you did before. When we look at Tagesschau, which is the largest German news magazine and also a magazine which heavily works on scientific data, proof and evidence, at the moment the travel industry is down by 90%, depending on which industry, region and country you're looking at. However, no matter in what kind of outlook you're looking, when you look at different scenarios, and I'm sure you heard about the scenario technique, then most companies plan to have a minimum of a 30% cut on travel expenses. And of course, many of this is also related to a focus on sustainability. When you now want to fly around the globe to simply meet someone in person, you should always wonder, is this an environmentally, not only economically, but an environmentally good decision? Because often it is not. So when the travel industry is down and you can expect 1/3 of travel costs will be cut, many organizations will implement home office solutions, which means work from home solutions or flexible workplace solutions. You must be able to meet customers, clients, potential customers, potential clients online if you want it or not. And most people are not ready to do so. By the way, we have a great interview guest with us today. At the end of the podcast, you're going to listen to Karr, someone who brings decades and decades of sales and leadership experience with him. So it really pays off to stay until the end, because he's also going to make you so first he gives you an insight to his new book, but also he gives you a special offer which is only available for the people who will stay until the end. But first, focus on customer contact online. What is the point now for you to keep preparing for the end of the pandemic? Of course, you have to be prepared. But when we look into how does communication work, often we see that senior leaders fail left, right, and center. I'll just give you a couple of examples. The CEO of the US pharmaceutical company Visuel, Sam Johnson, a 46-year-old CEO, and I tell you, I only mention his name here because it was already mentioned in press. He was fired because he said that Dalton Stevens, someone who's 18 years old, looks like an idiot for wearing a red dress for prom night. And here we are again, old men judging young people on their choice of clothing. So just some update for the people who might by coincidence came to this podcast via time travel from the pre-1968 movement. And just to address my personal bias, I'm a liberal conservative, which means I'm on the political side of keeping the economy first. State should work in favor of the economy, low taxation, less regulation. So I am not a left-wing person. But just an update for the ones who obviously came from a different decade of time to us today. People can wear whatever clothes they want. There is no boy clothing or male clothing or female clothing, or it doesn't exist. And if someone decides to wear a dress for prom night, he, she, or whatever else gender identity the person might have, they are allowed to do so whenever they want. And as you see, because some of you might now say, no, I disagree with that. Well, you can disagree. And you can, of course, do what Mr. Johnson has done here and called someone, and I quote, looking like an idiot for wearing this dress. You're just going to lose your job over it. So maybe your choice to either not only talking about change in your organization, that's what you tell your employees, remember, live the change, be open for adaptations. Maybe you walk the talk and you live by what you preach. We, of course, had other incidents as well. KPMG now decided to have a new CEO. You might remember that we had KPMG on the podcast just recently when their former UK chairman had to step down due to the remark that, in his opinion, unconscious bias doesn't exist. An appalling remark, which, of course, caused complaints for a very good reason, and then he stepped down, which I think was the move before. Otherwise, if he had not stepped down, then they would have forced him to step down or removed him from office. So now Mary O'Connor took over for the last 2 months. Mary O'Connor was expected to be the new CEO, and now they had a vote amongst all the partners, 75% min, and surprise, surprise, the nearly all min electorate. The nearly all min voting people decided not to keep Mary O'Connor as the CEO, but now they offer the job of the CEO to the head of audit. And of course, head of audit, someone who is deeply rooted in the KPMG network, while Mary O'Connor was a bit of an outsider, as Financial Times called it. She was with the company for about 2 years now, and the other person is there for way longer. So it's another network approach, as we see here. And Mary O'Connor did what many people did not expect. She left KPMG, and then she said she's very thankful for being able to offer her skills to KPMG, but she now thinks that her leadership skills and leadership career is better outside the organization. And that's, by the way, the polite British version of a middle finger towards an organization. And another chance for KPMG to look a bit more diverse, or at least to say we are changing something for the better. I really wish the new CEO all the best, head of auditing, now moving into the CEO's post. I really hope that this goes well. However, KPMG still has to face the claim that it's a non-diverse organization. 75% of all partners are male, and while Mary O'Connor had the chance to become the new CEO, they now voted her down. There might be reasons why they have done so, but let's face it, communications is also about what people see and perceive what is communicated, and KPMG here, once more, in my opinion, failed. And when you talk about the last bit of communication before we look into the issues you have when you meet customers online, Newsmax, one of the TV channels which is a bit far right, not to say it is completely far right-winged, now had an out-of-court settlement with Dominion, the company which produces election machines. And these election machines, that's what Newsmax claimed, were manipulated, or one employee of Newsmax had an employee of Dominion claiming that there was manipulation going on before. In front of court, then it came out that this was only a person that cleaned machines, was not involved with IT, project management, or anything which could only point to the slightest kind of manipulation. So there's an out-of-court settlement. We will never know how much money is involved with that, but this comes with a price tag, as we all know. Newsmax now had an out-of-court settlement, it had to issue an apology about claiming that Dominion voting machines were manipulated. And once more, one single phrase can ruin a whole business. So where is the problem now? Why is the risk when you meet online so much higher to fail compared to meeting on site? And I can tell you why. When you sit together in a room, when you do something wrong, people will, and if it's only out of politeness, but they will sit there until the meeting is over and you all just go their way. When you meet online, people do not do that. When you say something which is either not interesting, irrelevant, self-centered, or simply rude, impolite, or unacceptable, even when you didn't do it deliberately, when you say something which is completely out of the range of acceptable statement, people will say, either they will simply say, I think it's unacceptable, goodbye. That's more the German approach, I think. Most people will say something like, oh, sorry, I just got a phone call, have to end the meeting here, I'm going to call you back or just send you an email. And they will never do. as you know, when they end the meeting. So we have to look into the aspect of what is the problem here. And often people say, well, when you make a statement, other people do not like it. These people are overly sensitive. No, they are not. People aren't upset about anything with sensitivity or someone being overly sensitive. People are upset because back in the days, as they always say, they could say something which they, in today's times, cannot get away with anymore. And that's what they're upset about. You simply want to have it your way. But when you meet online with a customer, you must have it the customer's way if you like it or not. And you have to get your people professionally trained and coached to do so online at any point in time given. Also, another part of the problem is that lots of claims with diversity. Many companies claim they are very diverse. Often this diversity is nothing else than marketing, because you only need 1 or 2 questions to find out if they are truly diverse. Question number 1, show me the board of directors and the level below it, or maybe the controlling board of directors, depending if you're in a monistic or a dualistic company setup. So you look at the top 1, 2, 3 levels of leadership, and then you simply ask on this top 1, top 2 levels of leadership, just show me the share of women and minorities on these levels. And suddenly it becomes very quiet. Because often many people drove diversity only by numbers. And then they said, oh, we have 49.5% women in our organization. And of course, when your question then is, how many of them are in the top 3 leadership levels? And you suddenly realize, not that many. What a coincidence. You see that diversity often was misused for marketing, which is of course appalling. Because when you try to portray a certain picture, and that's the next part of the issues organizations have, especially when you meet online. When you meet online and you portray a certain picture of an open-minded organization, a modern organization, an organization which has digitization, and an organization which simply portrays a picture to the outside world that you will fulfill every single wish the customer has. People in today's world can quickly check if this is true or if you just made that up. And in many cases, people just made it up. I can tell you one aspect where a customer was very keen that we need modern and very agile digital communication. And then the person selling, and it was in the construction industry where they were selling certain machines for construction plants, construction areas. Cranes is one of them. And they said, sorry, when you want to place an order, you can only do it via fax. And that happened, by the way, in the year 2021. Fax. I don't even have a fax number anymore. And I don't know when I received the last fax, must be ages ago. And I know that in certain industries, fax really still is. When you look at, for example, Wirth, the large company producing screws, they still say they make billions on the order channel fax. And there's a good reason why they then can keep the fax. But this is because the customer wants to have the fax number, not vice versa. And often when I see people meeting online, it's often that the person presenting, and often presenting means you're trying to sell something. In the English-speaking world, this is not as bad as it is in the German-speaking world. In Germany, they hate sales for no particular reason, or at least for no particular reasonable reason. When you present something and you have an opinion, or you have to have good news, bad news, you're always trying to sell something. Sales is everywhere. And as soon as you meet customers, you normally do it to convince them to either stay with you, not cancel the contract, or to start a contract and buy something with you, which is sales. So stop pretending that you are from HR or customer service. Sales is everywhere, if you like it or not. And by the way, I was not a born salesperson. I really learned it the hard way. And the first years in my working career, I really said that sales is horrible. And I really thought that sales is nothing good. However, getting back to the picture you portray. When you portray a picture to the outside world, during an online meeting, people have access to every bit of information they want. They can open browsers, they can Google, they can background check. And when they simply see that what you portray there is not correct, then you simply will go the way of the dodo. By the way, if people don't know what a dodo is, it's an extinct animal. So you simply cannot pretend that having a certain brand is enough in today's world. Branding is important, no question about that. But we cannot say that prominence is competence. And by the way, there are certain people out there who claim that prominence is competence. Some people even claim that prominence is more important than competence. These people have their own agenda, and normally they want to sell dodgy courses, trainings to you. Of course, competence rules. Prominence with branding is part of a certain strategy, and branding is very important. No question about that. But prominence never replaces competence. And if you want to know what happens when prominence replaces consequence, when you want to see what goes wrong, when prominence, so being known, being a so-called VIP, being a celebrity, when that replaces competence, you don't only have to look at a certain former president who is now fortunately no president anymore. Just look into what we have in today's media landscape. Some people suddenly from dubious radio stations jumping to TV formats like "I'm a celebrity, get me out of here," and suddenly 1 year later they're commenting on international politics. Surprisingly, they make ridiculously bad commenting, and especially their postings on social media are appalling. So this is what happens when you try to pretend online that you are a certain organization, but you are not. It will catch up with you very quickly. It doesn't mean that you can't repair the damage, but it will be a delay in customer contact. And of course, for that moment, of course, you lose the customer in that meeting. And of course, when you want to have better online presentations, you need professional training, or you can have coaching sessions. You can have consultants who tell you how to do that. You can have large events where you have professional speakers giving speeches about the future of, for example, virtual or remote speaking. The correct term, by the way, is remote speaking, because virtual means it's not really there, like virtual memory with a computer, memory which is not really there. That's why we say remote meetings and remote speaking, not virtual. You don't have a virtual meeting, because a virtual meeting would mean there is no meeting. But you have a meeting, so it's a remote meeting. So speaking, and of course, when you have project or interim managers who might help you with that, there are different ways, and I'm happy to have a chat with you over it. However, we now want to look into how to do it better, how to do customer contact online much better than we did before. And step one, always consider when you say something which is inappropriate, you might harm people. And it might just be a joke. It might be a statement you really didn't mean in the wrong way. But as you know, "I didn't mean it" is not an excuse. It never was, and it never will be. If you get in your car and you run over 3 people by coincidence, say, I didn't mean to, that doesn't make it any better. You ran over 3 people. So always be aware that online, one wrong phrase is enough to lose the client completely. Also, when you never were professionally trained to do online meetings, online presentations, and of course that often means a certain marketing or sales approach towards the customer, you shouldn't be surprised that you're not going to make the cut in comparison to your competitor. I saw many online meetings which started with "Hello, my name is blah, blah, blah." Nothing in for me. I don't want to, I probably know who you are, otherwise we wouldn't meet. Next step is, we were founded 1882. I don't care. Or when you start there, how long do you want to make the introduction? That might take a couple of hours right now. And then you show the world map with all your location and a picture of your phone. Honestly, no one cares. As Jeffrey Gitomer rightfully says, he says, "What's in it for me?" And you have to be even more spot on when you are in a customer contact online, no matter if it's a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom meeting. Any meeting you have must focus on people are listening and they have a very short attention span, and attention spans are getting shorter and shorter due to the civilization we live in, which, by the way, you will not change, and complaining about it doesn't make it any better. If you are not spot on from the very beginning in an online meeting, you are not going to succeed with the customer you have sitting on the other side of the screen. Always be aware that a professionally led online meeting means what's in it for the customer comes first, followed by, of course, what's in it for you, because they want to have benefits, a solution maybe for their project or idea, or they want to buy something from you. Give them their benefits, and then of course talk about your benefits as well, because you want to make money out of that. Of course you want to. And getting back to what I said before, when you want to portray a certain picture of your organization, always be aware that diversity is important. However, and this is the moment where I know that some people will write me bad emails, especially people who are now very far left-winged. Diversity means that you have a social accountability, but you also have an economic accountability towards your organization. You cannot simply replace people just to add certain numbers to the diversity counter and then say, now the problem is solved, but we have people in their seats who are unable to do their job. Oh, by the way, that's a two-way street. When you now have people in certain jobs who are only there due to favors of their personal non-diverse networks, these people, of course, shouldn't be in these seats as well. So you need to replace them as well. So no excuse for you not to act towards diversity, because we all know that corporate and company networks are full of people who are in many cases there due to certain favors and not due to their skills. When network and prominence suddenly replaces competence, it's going south from there, which means it's not going to end well. Just be aware of the fact that a lot of excellent work can be completely deleted, killed, dismissed, made completely useless and worthless with only one wrong phrase online. Because ending an online meeting is really easy. When you're reasonably straightforward, you can simply either pretend that you had the internet line cut off, or you simply say, sorry, that was inappropriate. Or you can simply say, look, I just got a phone call, finding some excuse. Or people even simply finding an excuse why they have to leave the meeting due to an email, another meeting coming in. It is really easy for people to get rid of you when you have an online meeting. And that means you have to be a lot better when it comes to customer contact online. So first, I have, of course, because that was a lot of stuff we now have to face, because many people, I think, are sitting at home right now and think the normality I knew is going to return, and it's not. It's not going to return. That's why people for months already talk about the new normal, and the online world will be a huge part of it. However, when you now want to know how to do leadership and sales, and you must, so first, of course, I have to thank you for listening to me about that, because I know it can be quite tough, especially in today's times, but I'm even prouder right now to have a guest with me who is someone who made it through numerous crisis, the hardest ones we can imagine, bringing with him decades and decades of experience in leadership and sales. We are going to have a special guest here from New York City. It's Karr, who just published his new book, Velocity Mindset. And he's going to give you excellent advice about how you can make leadership and sales happen in your organization. So first, of course, I have to thank you for listening to me so far. But I talked enough now, so let's get straight to the interview. Leadership and sales are two aspects that any organization needs. However, many people are very much trouble thinking about the term mindset, and especially in the European market, many people hear about the word mindset, but they don't really know what it means, and they can't connect anything with it, because many people don't even know what is the mindset. Is there any kind of special mindsets? Are there different kind of mindsets? And we have an expert about sales and leadership here with us today, the author of Velocity Mindset. Hello and welcome, Karr.
Thank you, Niels. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for taking the time. And I'm getting straight into the topic. What is a velocity mindset? What does it mean? What does it mean to have a velocity mindset?
So, Niels, if you hear the word velocity, what's the first word that comes to your mind?
Well, something with speed, something with direction.
Yeah. So for most people, it's speed. All right.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is people are working really hard and fast to get things done. They're trying to get through their to-do lists and all. But at the end of the day, when they're done, they're asking themselves, what did I really accomplish?
Mm.
And if you take the physics definition of velocity, it's speed with direction. So the velocity mindset is making sure that you're driven by your purpose, what it is you're trying to achieve at the end, and making sure that all your actions support that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So when people now think of something they have in mind, they have a direction, maybe they have some sort of vision. That's a word many people use. I think many people have an idea of what they want to accomplish. However, we know many people do not. So what holds leaders back to turn their idea, their vision into reality?
Well, the Velocity Mindset is broke up into three parts. So first of all, they think they have the vision, but they really don't. And I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
What we say to people when they want to create a vision, whether it's for a task or a year's work of productivity or whatever, the first thing you want to do is start with a clean piece of paper. What do we mean by
Mm-hmm.
that? Well, we all have biases and experiences based on all of what's happened to us in life. We have ideas as to what we think is possible or not. So what most people do is when they create a vision, it's clouded by their fears and by what they think is possible or not. And that's not breaking through the glass ceiling. That's not
Mm-hmm.
creating new roads. Starting with a clean piece of paper means you put your biases and experiences away. It's simply about, what do you want your destiny to be? What are you passionate about? And just write it down. And what you're going to find out is that will probably take a different set of actions than the vision that's clouded by what you think is possible or not possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when people now try to put this in place, I know that in your book, you write about the law of focus. And especially that is something which distinguishes especially the European from the American market. Many people in Europe have the impression that the US is a lot about show and just fake it till you make it, all these kind of fluffy terms like mindset, etc. So you seem to be a lot more specific. And you mentioned the law of focus. So first, what is it? And how does the law of focus work?
Well, the law of focus, like for instance, the Velocity Mindset book, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have been teaching the concept for a couple of years, and I knew I wanted to create a book out of it. And so my vision was not just the Velocity Mindset book, but it was what it was going to look like and what was going to be the audience. It was not just business people, because I believe it's good for anybody who wants to get ahead in life. So I had the vision as to what I wanted to create and how many people I wanted to read it and so forth. And that was in my mind in March when the lockdown started. And then what I did was I took that time to really double down on writing the book. And my focus was about that vision. That helped us then create the right table of contents. That vision as to what we wanted that book to be and what we wanted people to walk away with allowed us to understand what the chapters would be and what the key points would be. And once you have that, the writing becomes very easy. And then your marketing also has to be based on that vision. It has to be based on, okay, are you giving information to the market segments you want to buy it? Are you now putting the word out there about the book to that market segment? Are you giving them value? So at the end of the day, they're saying, hey, this is really helping me. I want to buy that book. That's what focus is. It's a singular, I'm using the word focus again because I don't have a better word, but it's a singular focus on what you want to achieve.
Excellent. And I think that especially works well in the European market because many people like when something gets very specific. Why do you think that so many people struggle to keep focus on something? Because even from our industry, we have people who speak about one thing in 1 year, another thing in the next year, and they have 4 different topics in the next 5 years. So they're obviously unable to focus. Why do so many people struggle to focus?
Well, there's several reasons. One is that they're not really that passionate about it. You got to have something that you're really passionate because emotion is one of the most critical forces in life. It could be good and drive you. It could be bad and it could divert you. So what happens is if something happens like a pandemic and then all of a sudden, it knocks everybody off their path, is that passion for what you want to do, like I have with the Velocity Mindset, strong enough to bring you back up, off the side of the road and back on the road to where you want to go? If it's not passionate enough, it won't be strong enough to keep you going in tough times. That's number one. Number two is the stories we tell ourselves. Stories are emotional filled. Now, again, for some people, it drives them. If someone had a story that they created about that they're not good enough because of what they were told earlier, then that might be enough to drive one person to do whatever it takes to succeed. On the other hand, for another person who has the same story, that might not drive them forward. It may get in their way of going forward because they're afraid they'll be found that they're a fraud. So you have to look at the stories. And the key thing about stories, Niels, is that they're not reality. Everything is a story. We create it. So if you say something to me, all of a sudden I'm creating a story as to what I think you mean by that. Now, if I can realize what's happening at the time the story comes into my mind, and if I can realize that it's starting to take away the passion for what I want to do, then at least the first thing I need to do is acknowledge that it's a story. And once I acknowledge it, if I created it, I have the power to change the story. That's what you have to do to keep an intense focus of what you want to achieve.
Excellent. And as you mentioned, the pandemic, many people perceive the pandemic as some sort of forced pause. They suddenly had to pause, and many people, especially when they are heavily influenced by certain TV shows or Hollywood shows where they say never pause, just keep on working. And as you said, many people just work hard with no direction. And in your book, you mentioned the art of the pause. So how does it work? What is it? And why do I need to have this velocity mindset?
So that's a great question. So number one, the pandemic obviously was awful for everybody, especially those who were physically affected and who died and all those whose lives were turned over. But what it did do, it did give us a collective pause. It made us all stop, and everybody started asking themselves, what's their purpose? What am I really doing? And does what I'm doing work? And a lot of people in the pandemic made life changes because of that. Okay. But that's the power of the pause. So let's put it in a business term. A pause could be as simple as you're ready to pick up a phone to call a client. Number one, pause. Ask yourself, what is the purpose? What success look like from this call? Get it clear in your mind, because that's going to dictate the action. So, for example, if a salesperson has a 5 sales call cycle, meaning it takes about 5 times to speak to someone to close a deal, and they're having the first call, if their purpose is to close this customer, that is the worst thing that they can go after, because it means all they're going to do is talk too much, talk about things that are not important to the customer, and not ask the right questions. But if they pause and they say, okay, what's my goal here? And you realize, well, it's the first in 5 calls. So what's my real purpose? The real purpose is to qualify whether or not it's a legitimate prospect. And if so, what's the next step forward? That's as simple as that.
Excellent. So how would the world look like? What would the world look like if everyone has this velocity mindset? Because it would be a massive change to the economy as we know it, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I like you work with a lot of CEOs and executives and C-suites, and I have someone retainer that I've been working with for a year, 5 years, whatever. And what always amazes me, and it's not related to any one person, we all do it. I even am guilty of it. You start asking yourself as a consultant, why are we still talking about the same issue 9 months later?
Yeah.
How much time did we lose? All right. So the issue is that, when we're doing the velocity mindset, again, it's not about speed. You gotta start asking yourself, am I doing the same thing? Am I still in the same position? If so, why? So when I look at CEOs, for example, many times they'll sit there and they'll say, oh man, they're still the same number of revenue and they still want to double their business, let's say. And they're still complaining about this person. Well, that person replaced the person you just fired 6 months ago. And then they're complaining about something else. Well, I always ask them one question. With all the changes, who's the constant here? You. So how are you getting in the way?
Yeah. Absolutely. That is also about asking questions that let's face it, many consultants would not dare to ask this question because they might fear the answer, right?
Well, then that's not a good consultant, because quite frankly, CEOs hire consultants for one of 2 reasons: either to validate what they're thinking or to tell them what they need to hear.
Yeah.
They have enough people who are yes people in their companies, and they don't need that in a consultant. I remember one time I was doing a 360. That's where you assess everybody around the CEO, just so he can understand what people are thinking and feeling. And we did over close to $1 million with this guy. We developed great results. And then finally he said, do a 360 on me. And we did it. And my colleague and I went to visit with him in his boardroom. We scheduled 2 hours. And my colleague was 300 pounds, 6'5", a big dude. And so he was on one side of the conference table, I was on the other, and the CEO was at the end. And he starts giving the findings of the 360. And all of a sudden, the CEO starts going into his usual BS, why that's not so, why that's not so. And his story started getting in the way because he's in competition with his siblings and personal ways that he looked at life. And I'm going, oh my God, here we go again. And then I realized it was not working. And I realized, he's not going to get the benefit of this if we don't do something drastically. So I caught the eye of my colleague and I nodded at him and he started getting the fear of life. Like, what's he going to do now? And I realized the only way to get through this guy was shock and awe. And I slammed my fist down on the table. And I said, look, you can keep doing this BS and telling us why it's not working, but all that's doing is not helping you. Yeah. If you really want to break through this thing, listen to the information. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you. And so all of a sudden he started listening. And even though he scheduled 2 hours, we walked out 6 hours later. Yeah. But you have to be willing to do that. If not, I don't think you're worth the weight of being a consultant.
Very well said. Very well said. Of course, now I have to ask, because we live in when we're now talking, we're still living in a world where the pandemic is still not over. So how do I keep the momentum? How do I maintain the velocity when most of my staff is working from home? Because let's face it, many leaders are not well prepared when they have to lead from a distance. So how can I keep the momentum, the velocity alive when the majority of my workforce is not physically present in my office?
So the keys are empathy and engagement. I'll say that again, empathy and engagement. Now, a big part of the book, we get into the neuroscience of what it takes to engage others and get them involved, whether it's on a Zoom, phone, or even in person. So number one, that they're going to be actively involved in a conversation. Number two, they're going to want to follow your lead. Remember, a leader is only as good as the people who can enroll others into the cause, right? So it's empathy. When we started, when the lockdown started, I started doing daily videos simply on pushing empathy. Don't make sales calls, make help calls. Again, if you have the right vision, it's going to lead to a different set of actions. No one wanted to hear from a salesperson once the lockdown happened. They're all into their own cortisol fueled, which is what we talk about, disaster zone, their fight or flight, and they're all, fleeing. So if you're going to call up and try and sell something to somebody when business is shut down, they're not even listening to you. But if you called up and said, hey, talk to me, how's this affecting you? I'm really concerned for you and all that. So number one, executives have to have empathy for their employees. The old adage is simple. People don't do things because you want them done. They do it for their own reasons. So executives need to take the time to find out what motivates people. We put an example in the book about a production manager who was really ticked off because the guy was on a cell phone and his job was late. And I said, well, wait, and what'd you do? He said, I told him to get off the cell phone. And I said, what happened? He got really upset and we argued. I said, how did that work out for you? So I asked him, what does the guy want to do? He goes, he wants to be a master welder. So what does it take to be a master welder? Be on time and have quality. I said, great. How's his quality? Perfect. Is he on time? No. So change the context. Go to him and say, hey, you want to be a master welder? This is about him, not about me now. And we know quality and on time. Your quality is perfect. On time. You're 20 minutes behind on this job. What could we do to get you back on time so you're back on the path to being a master welder? And all of a sudden, the guy started being engaged. He started talking about things he could do. And the next thing you know, the job caught up. Why? Because that manager had a different conversation.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
That is a very, very good example. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. So one more question, and then I have one bonus question. What should leaders do right now? Because we are now on the brink where we say the economy is going to reopen. The economy, of course, is going to shift. It's going to be what many people call the new normal. So what, in your opinion, should leaders do right now when the economy is on the way to opening up again?
Number one, they need to revisit what their vision is for success in their company, because it may have changed in their minds based on the pandemic. So they have to recalibrate that. And then they have to work their way back and ask, what are the key actions we have to do that may be different today, given the fact that people may be working remotely or whatever, because things are not the same as they were before the pandemic. So they have to take that plan and review it, and they have to update it with How do they have to engage differently based on what's happening today? How do they understand what motivates people? How do they get people motivated to push forward? And probably they're going to have more flexibility than they used to have. Let's face it. If someone's stuck working from home with kids at home from school, right? If a kid is yelling or needs help, the parent has to go do that, all right? So they may not be able to get something done in 5 minutes, but as long as they get it done that day, that's all you really care about. So you have to maybe be a little bit flexible of how you expect things in the past to what you expect now. But being flexible does not mean that you give up on your ideals or your purpose.
Excellent. So, of course, there's now one bonus question. When you know me well, I'm going to ask for something for our listeners. So, of course, when you now have the book, Velocity Mindset, of course, we like to know, when will it be on the market? And then I would like to ask, is there anything which you could do for our listeners, maybe a little bonus, a little extra, something you would be willing to give away for us? Is there anything?
Sure. So,
good.
Number one, if they would be kind enough to go to velocitymindset.com, they will get an offer to pre-purchase the book before May 11th. And then they will automatically get an invitation to a private online training session that I will do on May 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern time on the Velocity Mindset. So they'll get the book as soon as it comes out, and B, they'll get a training that most other people will not get.
Excellent. And also 1 p.m. Eastern time works very well for the European market as well. It's basically a good time for us to go online as well. And this will be delivered personally by you, by the author of the book, Velocity Mindset.
Personally by me on May 19th. And again, all they have to do is go to velocitymindset.com, click the link to Amazon and get the book, and then go back to that website, velocitymindset.com, and insert your sales receipt so that you qualify for your invitation.
Perfect. These are the perfect final words for this podcast. Of course, I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast. And at the end, there's only one thing for me left to say. Ron, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Niels. It's been a pleasure.